everyone, to the Polarian series of webinars. Today's presentation, Automotive SPICE Requirements. Our agenda today includes our guest speaker from Quantum Technologies. Thank you for joining us, and we will commence shortly. I wanted to provide a quick background for those of you who may not be familiar with Polarian software. Polarian is the creator of the world's fastest enterprise-scale-based ALM solution. We are a thriving international company with offices across Europe and North America and a wide ecosystem of partners worldwide. Polarian supports any type of process or methodology for all organizations of all sizes. Today's agenda will start with a presentation by Quantum Technologies, followed by a short demonstration of the Polarian solution, and we'll wrap it up with an interactive Q&A session. First, I would like to introduce Stefan Schuck, Systems Engineer with Polarian Software, who has helped Polarian customers like Quantum Technology manage the complexities of functional safety standards and compliance, such as Automotive SPICE. Stefan has his Bachelor of Engineering degree from the University of Applied Sciences in Berlin, Germany. Our featured speaker today is Eugenia Yaniga, Vehicle Software Quality Engineer with Quantum Technologies. Quantum Fuel System Technologies Worldwide is a leader in innovation, development, and production of natural gas fuel storage systems and the integration of vehicle system technologies, including engine and vehicle control systems and drivetrains. Eugenia will share her experience in working with Automotive SPICE and SPICE HIS and Functional Safety Standard 26262. As a software architect in 3 vehicle electronic product lines, she is a strong analytical and creative problem solver. Thank you. And again, welcome, Eugenia.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your attendance to this webinar. As Nancy mentioned I've been working with Quantum Technologies 3 years so far, and previously I have a background as a software engineer for 11 years at Delphi Automotive Systems as a software team leader. So I really know what is the perspective of implementing a process, but from the engineering perspective, what we need to do and what needs to happen so it can be really implemented. For the Quantum Technologies, the company that I'm working for, we are designers, engineering, and manufacturing of CNG fuel systems, hybrid powertrain controllers, conversion from gas to electric vehicles. Anything that is aftermarket, we take the current production vehicles like the Ford F-150 and Prius and some others, or trucks, big trucks, and then we convert them to alternative technologies. Okay, so what we're going to see here in this webinar is what is the automotive industry overview, needs and trend, and how Polarian can help the automotive industry, which means the automotive standards compliance. Okay, any questions, you can just go to the chat panel and we are going to be able to answer your questions. Okay, so what are the overview and what are the needs? Okay, as everybody knows, 20 years ago, the engineering development was about 5 years. That's because the systems were not that complex. Still, some processes were introduced to the automotive industry, like CMM, which is Capability Maturity Model, the Bootstrap, and SPICE. SPICE was more intended for IT technologies, computer-based, not really for automotive. Therefore, 10 years later, the big expansion happens because we had a lot of mini computers that are inside of the vehicle. Therefore, a specific process was needed. In this case, the automotive SPICE. Okay, in this moment, 10 years ago, the software upgrade to service locations happened because the software was now capable to be reflashed in microcontrollers, which we couldn't do that like 20 years ago. What that happened is that since software is something that you cannot touch and it does not involve hardware, so it can be changed at any moment. And because of that, then the interactions in development are a lot more faster or changes in last minute. Okay, but what's going on right now? Okay, right now, because of that characteristic that I mentioned, the electronic components grow really, really so fast, such a way that we can have up to 200 in-vehicle mini computers. All the luxury cars that you see outside, like the mini camera that is on the rear, the fancy displays that is multimedia, and then the cluster, and then the airbags. Before it was only two airbags, the front and left, and now you have front, left, rear, knees, and then side, and all that. So every single component that is in the vehicle needs to be controlled by software. So that's why it was increased a lot. And because of that, of course, the software now is focused in safety, drivability, and comfort to the end user, like what you just mentioned for airbags, right? And for powertrain, for example, that we are going to alternative technologies. So anything needs to be more controlled in how much fuel is injected and the speed and all that. So everything is software. So because of that, then you require the unique processes like Automotive SPICE and ISO 262. And as I mentioned before, the software interactions, because the software can be updated at any moment during development time, then the interactions were changed from months to weeks. And probably everybody that is in this webinar can understand that is really, really extremely hard to do documentation and implementation and then testing and then make the product work. Okay, and because of that, we need a environment that we can combine the fast development, the standard project management, and easy to use. That's why we choose Polarion, because it's everything developed in small pieces. So this is a little trend of what's going on the automotive industry. By 2025, all the auto manufacturers will be required to produce vehicles that will deliver 54.5 miles per gallon. Therefore, the powertrain with CNG, hybrid combustion, electrical vehicles will grow up really fast in the market. Also, a lot of sensors and technology will be added to the vehicle, which means the complexity is going to be bigger, right? And then because of safety, then there will be a remote access, telematics to web portals, displays to monitor when some event happened, and then recording more information and all this stuff. And of course, what we all like, which is the smart connectivity, which is your cell phones connected to internet inside of a vehicle, charging the cell phone inside of the vehicle remotely and stuff like that is prototypes that are ongoing right now. So because of all that, if you put all that together, that means that the vehicle right now could have up to 100 millions of lines of code. If you put the code for the airbag, the code for the brake system, the code for the engine, the code for the powertrain, the code for the fuel system, the code for the battery, and everything together, that is really, really, really big. So because of all these advances that are going to be by nearly 12 years from now, 11 years, then it's expected that it's going to be around 300 millions of lines. So all this complexity for us as an engineer is we like to be concentrated in how to make these things work, right? So it's not the same having the automotive process. It's not the same to fill out a lot of documentation, because a process check mark does not mean that the software has been developed with quality. Okay, that's why this automotive process that we did here at Quantum is from the engineering perspective, not from the documentation perspective. Okay, so why the automotive standards are required? Well, as everybody knows, we need to reuse code through different platforms with different engineering teams. Because of the complexity of the software, then it's nearly impossible to start from scratch every time that a new vehicle is out on the road, right? And then also we need to have a common structure in the software development that anyone can follow. Like if you have a different product lines and then you move one person or one engineer from one competency to another one, it should be able to understand how the software was developed. And then of course the certifications that the vehicle is safe. There are different rounds of certifications, emissions, and then for safety, the R13 for Europe, all this torque evaluation, how everything that is saved. So of course it needs to be evaluated. In my opinion, the complexity of the software is too big to store the information in our head. Per nature, the engineer likes to fix things, right? And we like to just start like flowing in the cloud and then figure out how things are gonna work. But we're concentrating on one feature today. In 2 months from now, we might not remember that. Because of that, then there is no way to demonstrate that the software does what it's intended to do unless the functionality is documented. And then because of that, of course, we have the processes that is SPICE ISO 15504, which is the normal SPICE what's intended for IT. We have the automotive SPICE, which is a subset of SPICE, and ISO 262 for safety. Okay, this is a small comparison of what really means for engineering, what is automotive SPICE and what is SPICE ISO 1554. In the left, you can see that we have the SPICE. We have, for example, system requirements analysis and design. For automotive, that is not enough because we will have to have architecture design. This is extremely important for a vehicle because if the architecture is not well defined, at the moment that all the components are integrated or set up in the vehicle to talk each other, and if that architecture is not well defined, then they won't be able to communicate. Okay, so that's why it's a subset. And then we have another subset that is the system integration and testing. This, from the computer perspective, you do the integration and testing in one place. In the automotive, we do have system integration testing in one place, and we can have the system testing in another place, which means that I can have the testing in one component here in my desk, and then go to the vehicle in here in my company, but still I have to integrate the powertrain into the OEM's integration system. That's where all the suppliers come along, and then everything needs to be tested. Okay, all these steps were added for automotive SPICE, and that's why it's being said that it's a subsystem of SPICE. All of them follow the same regulations, which is the levels and all that, but we will talk about that a little bit later. So this is the big question. Why following a process is really difficult in the automotive industry? Well, as I mentioned, an engineer wants to invent and to fix components. And myself as an engineer is like, we don't care about processes because it breaks the flow. I just want to do my job and that's it. I don't want to deal with documentation. And even if we want to, there is a downstream of that because the second bullet that I have here is that usually the requirements are distributed in multiple Word documents. What this means is that we get the specifications from an electrical component from a supplier. Let's say that I bought a sensor, so I have the specification of that sensor. And then I get the specification from the OEM that is going to tell me how he would like to read that sensor or what is the purpose of that sensor. And then I have the software requirement or the system requirement from my company that is going to tell me, okay, this is how I put the electrical information and what the OEM is asking for, and here is the document. But usually that doesn't happen in the real world. Therefore, we have to figure out, as a software developers, we have to figure out what the engineer tried to explain in that document, what the specification of the electrical component was there, and what the OEM tried. So it's like a multiple Word documents or PDF documents. And in order to do that, that is going to take me 3 days, I prefer to go with the system engineer and talk or give a call to the OEM, and then I can understand. But again, that was not documented, right? And then if we follow the traditional way, that the documentation is well done with talking with the customer, different interactions until it's perfectly clean, then that takes a large amount of time, which is taking time from our current development. So by the time that we want to do some software development, that time is already gone. And as an engineer, every time that we hear the word documentation, it really bothers us. Why saving time with a process tool is important? Well, usually the project manager establish a plan, right? So we have phases of the development. We have phase one or alpha, we have phase two, beta, phase three, gamma, or any other, right? Until we go through the path that is production. But that phases, each phase has a small interaction, but that plan is never really achieved because, as I mentioned, by the time that the requirement is being done for that phase one, let's say we have 4 weeks, and then in those 4 weeks, the requirement took to develop 2 weeks because the ideal is to have the requirement in one shot, and then the engineer or the developer takes the requirement and implements it. In the real world, that doesn't happen because we have to go to different interactions to understand what he really means. So instead of taking 1 week, it took 2 weeks. So that means that we have 2 weeks left before the deadline. And from those 2 weeks, it's only 1 week left for developer because there is 1 week for testing. So it's ridiculous sometimes, right? So that's why it's important to save timing with a tool. And then the other thing is that we don't like to attend to a lot of meetings because that again takes time from our coding development. So sometimes because the process required is if sometimes there are like pipe gates or gate reviews or group reviews and then all the stuff that sometimes we see it like let's review the review the review and that is ongoing and going and going. Okay, so what really cares for us or us from engineering perspective is okay, we are doing fast interactions in weeks. Therefore, the software development is so fast that when management comes in, we always gonna ask this, do you want process or do you want the component working? At the end of the day, in that moment, management is gonna say, get it done, get it working because that's how we are gonna keep paid. But then guess what? After we deliver, the next question, usually from the OEM or from the customer, is, oh, okay, how do I know that it's working? Give me your process documentation. And we are like, oh, we didn't have it, right? So, because of all these processes and everything that is ongoing, this is how we usually see the agenda. At 8:30 a.m., we are reading the high importance emails from last night. And basically, we are just going through. We see just yes, yes, no, yes, this is okay, this is not, and we don't read the whole thing. So, but still, it takes time. And then we have the project management meeting, which is usually for the process PVP 101, which is okay. And then we have the software agile scrum meeting, which is what I'm going to do this day to achieve. And then our software group meeting, right? Or the all hands meeting. And then by 11 a.m., we are so tired that we start whining that we have lost all morning already. And still the deadline is the same. So I start coding at 11:15 and then, okay, I'm hungry. I'm going to lunch at 12. And then at 12:40, I get a last-minute meeting because the customer called. There is an issue or something he wants to address or whatever, and then we take that call, right? And then at 1:30, the manager realized that the customer called, and therefore we have to go to the office to explain all the risk and why he called and what needs to be done, blah, 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 right? And then by 2 p.m., and I don't know why, but usually this is the time that the peer reviews happens and the bug fixes and meetings and all the stuff. So it's like, oh, sorry. It's like all the bug fixes and then always happen at 2 p.m. And then it's really frustrated. At that time is we are thinking about suicidal thoughts. This because we know that we are not going to get the job done as quickly as we wish. So we have to start coding again. But by that time, we are so tired that, of course, it's prone to errors. And by 5 p.m., we are thinking what we're going to say for tomorrow's meeting. So that is usually our agenda when there are a lot of processes and needs to be done. So okay, well, we know that we have to have automotive standards compliance, and we have to think, okay, how Polarion can help. Well, we know for fact that we have these processes. We have capability maturity model level 2. which is about 64 requirements that needs to be in compliance. Then we have level 3, which is 181 requirements. We have Automotive SPICE level 1, which is 225 requirements. We have ISO 262, which is ASIL level A, which is the lowest safety ranking, and it's about 500 requirements. And if we want to be functional safety ISO 262 ASIL D, which is the highest safety ranking, is about 700 requirements, 750. And these are the levels on how those are measured. Let's say that we are in this one and we want to reach this level, then that means that we will be in this level. So it's managed. The performance, there is performance management, there is work product management, therefore it's intended to be managed. Then you want level 3, then it means that it's established and process definition and process deployment. Usually in the automotive standard, this level 5 is what could be, let's say, the perfect solution, but all the software interactions and everything that is going so fast, I will say that the real world interactions is level 3 or level 4, because level 3 is what really you are looking for. You need to have a process that is established, which means that you have a process definition, everybody works in the same guidelines, and then the deployment means that everybody is following the same rules. It might not be perfect, and you might not be able to predict why your next interaction is going to happen, but you can demonstrate that what you did is intended to do what you say that it's going to do. And then if we reach level 4, then that means that you have process control and measurement. With Polarion, you can measure, but it still requires education from the engineering perspective to really follow exact moments of when things are happening, so it can be predictable. Let's say like the Agile Development Scrum. If you have one interaction now, and then you're measuring the ideal progress versus the real progress versus your estimates and all that, so next time with features similar to that, this process should be capable to know how long that is going to take. But in the real world, at least in automotive, that is not that easy, because a single feature means something really simple today and might be something complex the day after today. This is the usual B capability model for Automotive SPICE and ISO 262. This is what everybody knows. Even though it is in a nice B shape, it is still a waterfall, because you can see that it starts here and ends here. So it's operate concept, requirements and architecture, detail design, implementation, integration, system verification, and operation.
Okay, so welcome everybody from my side. My name is Stefan. The plan was to show you just a quick introduction, or to give every one of you a quick introduction into Polarion, to fulfill the picture here about what is needed for SPICE, or to implement such requirements coming from SPICE, coming from functional safety and so on, whatever you need in the automotive industry. Basically, what we can give you, or what I can show you, are some key elements from Polarion about what it is, how it can help you, what Maria is talking about, or has been talking about, and hopefully will continue to talk about in the next minutes. Basically, what Polarion is it's a browser-based solution or web-based solution. So all you need is a halfway current web browser, like I use here Chrome at the moment, and then that's what you get. You get an interface. You get different project templates coming with the Polarion installation, like in this case here, a special template for functional safety, for hazard analysis and risk assessment according to ISO 26262. This includes different parts, like of course the hazard analysis and the risk assessment, but also, for example, here we have a guideline on what steps or how to complete the different phases for such an hazard analysis. For example, here you start with your hazard identification, continue with the classification, continue with the ASIL determination. Depending on different aspects, you need to insert into the different work items. So, for example, here for the hazard classification, of course, you need to enter several values for classification or severity classification, for exposure classification, for controllability classification. You've got detailed guidelines here in the included how-to in this wiki page here, defining what level to choose in what situation. And then if you entered all the three values, then you will get an automatically defined ASIL level from the values you just entered before. This is what it does here, and let me show you something else. For example, if we start here with such an hazard, let's see how such an hazard looks like in Polarion. So this is a basic work item view. As you can see here, you have different possibilities to enter your severity information. You can enter different operational situations here when such a hazard may occur. You have the chance to enter different values for severity, exposure, controllability, and also to describe the reason why you chose this level here. Everything can be included here. And of course, there are different other elements what you can insert as attributes for your hazard. And that's only one side of the medal, because in Polarion there are always many ways to roam, so many ways how you can work with the tool. That's also a great thing for usability, because these hazards, as you can see here in such an Excel-like view, you can also work with these hazards in a more table-like, in a more document-like form, as you're used to from Microsoft Office. So this would look like this. So here we have our normal document for hazard analysis and risk management. You have a header included here into the document with some additional information to describe the content of the document. Also some other chapters to handle the purpose, scope, and so on. Before we come to the hazard section, which there's nothing else than to include all the work items you've just seen in the list. So everything is here. You can also go into the work item properties pane on the right side and modify the different attributes. Here, for example, I can switch the operational mode from driving to stationary, and as you can see, this is also updated directly in the documents. This is a quite comfortable way to work with documents, to work with specifications, to work with all kinds of documents in Polarion, and together with the work item model behind, which is completely definable, together with the workflows which are included here. As you can see here in the status, right now the hazard I selected is in the status analyzed, but I could also say, okay, shall it go back to draft? Do I want to reject it directly because I don't like the way it's written, or shall I just continue and start progress here on this hazard? So if I do that, with changes here happening in the background, so I add some other browser window here. I made some changes here, which you can see here. So all the changes will be safely merged. So that's also fine. If you're working in a collaborative environment with different departments, for example, on your document, that's completely no problem here. And right now we can see that we are in the next status. We are in progress at the moment and can enter our work products.
We were talking about Automotive SPICE capability model and ISO 262, how the nice V shape is, but at the end of the day, this is the waterfall model, because you can see it starts here and it ends here, right? So you have concept, requirements and architecture, design, implementation, testing, validation, and operation. So it's the waterfall. So this, in the ideal world process documentation, it works, but in the real world, it doesn't. Because let's say that we are doing architecture and we are defining these requirements. At the moment that the design is ongoing, we might find out something that it will impact the architecture. So a small interaction needs to go back here and then go back again here, right? And then the same thing when we are doing implementation, we might find something that it was not contemplated, neither in the design or the architecture, or when we are doing the testing, we realize that something won't be possible, and then it will go back to here. I am the idea that it's better to work on the left side of the B, because the more that you spend your thoughts in how the system must work, rather than testing and then try to find out if it works, usually you will spend more time if you do that in this way. If you go to the testing area, it will take you more time to figure out how the system should work rather than you focus on how it really must work. Then you do coding. as I mentioned, that is in the ideal world, right? You have the V shape, you have documents for each phase, which usually doesn't happen at the same time or in the precise time. So the advantages is that still you have the order of precedence. Before you do implementation, you kind of need to know how that implementation is going to fit in the system, right? Therefore, you have to have some sort of architecture and design so you can really visualize and see how that is going to be implemented. So that's why the order of precedence still is needed. You cannot do testing if the code is not done, right? So it's order of precedence. Then, because of that, then we have the well-defined steps for different phases of the project, like acquisition, engineering, maintenance, and post-production changes. And the organization, if everything is followed ideally, then you have organization and risk tracking. However, the disadvantages, as I mentioned before, there is a slow, really slow development, and usually the next phase cannot start until the first one is done. It's like what I mentioned with the requirements. If the requirements are not done, ideally, the code development cannot start. That is a huge constraint, especially nowadays that we have to do faster interactions. We need something that we can start right now or parallel working or something like that that can help to the development and to achieve the milestones. The other disadvantage is that the hardware analysis impacting the software is not part of the ongoing process. On the nice V shape, even in ISO 262, the hazard is expected to be analyzed at the beginning of the project, but during the development, you might find another hazard. So you have to go back and do analysis again. Ideally, per process, you have done that already, which is not true. That's why this impacting the software because of hardware is ongoing process. That is like a live document that needs to be updated every time. So that is painful, updating documents every time, right? And then the following the sequence of processes is, or a check mark is not the same than developing software with quality. If we have like the V shape that we have in here, and we have the process that needs to be in compliance with all this stuff, it doesn't mean that just because you met the process, it doesn't mean that the product is working good. So you gotta be some combination. You need the background of automotive that acknowledge to work along with the process. A tool by itself won't solve that. The acknowledge itself won't solve that. Both need to work together. So how that is possible? Well, with Polarion, we found the perfect solution because we can find information really easy. We have the wiki pages that we can display the information in a user-friendly manner. So they don't have to be looking for in tons of a lot of documents, but they see the information that they want to see in that precisely moment. And then the keyword search for work items, documents, and wiki pages. If I have three multiple documents with different specifications, meaning kind of the same, I can still do the keyword. So I can find everything that is related to that feature instead of going to who knows drive or server that is located and then go and talk with the hardware engineer and then go and talk with the mechanical. Instead of doing that, then I can do keyword of the documents and then I'll find them. And of course, we can identify the phases of the project because you can define any time point at any time, and at the end of the day is an ID. So if the date changed, your content of information, it's just like a click to move it to a next phase or a next time point, and still the rest of the team is working with whatever they were assigned. So there are no Microsoft project external documents to keep track of that. And then also something important is, like I mentioned on the regular agenda, software engineer, daily painful because the processes, then we like to have from Polarion the visual trends. This means that the statistics that can help to predict the areas that were left behind. Keep in mind that these statistics to predict, this is not the predict of the level 4 of the process. Even though it can be done with Polarion, first you have to educate your team members to reach level 2 and level 3 of the process. Then you can predict. These statistics that I mentioned here that can predict the areas that were left behind is that you can see the work items that were done in the past and where are the features that the team is focused on. So if at the beginning of the quote or whatever you identified an item that it was part of the quote and then you realize 2 sessions or 2 interactions later that there is a little development that was ongoing because maybe the high priority ones were taking place for those interactions, then still you can see that. You can see what is left behind. And then we have the dashboards to present the managers or customers with no technical knowledge. This is also useful, especially when we have these meetings with managers or with persons who are not inside of the hurricane or the tornado, that they can see like the overall. So with this dashboard, it's better to explain the issues or how the project is behaving. Instead of having discussions that lead to nowhere, it's better to work with data. And then we can have visual measurement of processes compliance. So we have like the process for automotive, SPICE, and for ISO 262, you can measure that. Okay, why Polarion is good? Since everything is cut it out in small pieces, you saw with the presentation from Stefan that you have individual items, right? So because everything moves so fast, it's better to have small pieces of requirements and task and testing. For example, on the B shape, instead of doing the whole document and the software developer waiting for that whole document to be released, it's better to have a small requirement so he can start with that feature right away. And then the systems engineer or whoever is developing the requirement can continue with another feature in the same document even, but the previous requirement has been already released. So it's a small piece, so there is no delay. And then also it's good to have real-time monitoring. Just risk can be identified in front in small items rather than a big report. This is also useful because you can have the customer to log in and then record any issues that they were seeing today, let's say, and then tomorrow another one, and then in 2 days another one, rather than wait for the end of the testing and then receive a big Excel file with all the issues that they saw and then trying to figure out what's going on. It's better to be reported in the moment so engineering team can take action in that moment instead of waiting 1 week or 2 weeks when these big reports arise. Okay, so because of that, then it's better to have all the processes in one tool in small pieces. So combining a template with Automotive SPICE, ISO 262, and Agile Scrum can help with this. Okay, we have done this in quantum technologies, and it has worked very well. We have another important thing for processes, which is the full traceability with the documentation. As I mentioned, the engineer is more focused in developing or implementing stuff. So from the engineering perspective, it's better to make the things work and then later the documentation. So it couldn't be great that the tool can help you to build the documentation itself, so you don't have to write a lot of documents. So that's why it needs to be built as the system is developed. And then we can have the manufacturing request, the requirements, implementation, testing, release, traceability per phase of the project. So doing these small pieces, it can be done by creating all the requirements and implementation and everything, and then the queries and everything that Polarion has as capability, you can build the requirement, the documentation that the auditor is looking for in the format that they are looking for. Okay, so I mentioned the documentation. The release content is generated automatically. There is no manual linking of source code, comments, or requirements. This can be done automatically. We have automated traceability. There is no planning charts, no need of separate project schedule because everybody sees the same information at any time. The dashboards show the information, the real status of the project. The advances or the statuses on everything is seen in the same status. So anything that the engineer is looking at is the same that the management is looking at. And then for development, the engineer is focused more on specific tasks, so it doesn't have to attend to multiple meetings to explain what's going on because management can see the information right there in Polarion. And then the small B processes generated automatically because Polarion allows, like what Stefan shows, small items like the hazard analysis, and then you can have a requirement, and you can have testing, and can have all those work items work together. Therefore, it's a small B process, so it's more likely to work faster. The development in parallel of tasks assigned to different sprint releases. Because everything is in small pieces or requirement individual items, then those can be assigned to different people, which can be intended for different time points, which is the opposite than the regular B shape with a lot of documentation that usually a plan is developed in a Word document or project schedule, and then everybody follows whatever is in there. So it's not easy to see how the next interaction is going to fit, because unless you use Microsoft Project for everything, even for testing, timing, and estimates and everything, you cannot really see the workload of the engineer. So with that, then if you can see that, then you can assign to different engineers in parallel, right? Because you can see what really is going on. With simple workflow transitions, this is something from Automotive Spice and regularly with other companies that establish like the pipe reviews. And then you have, okay, the change request, and then it goes to meeting, and then everybody decides if that change request is okay. And then from there, it goes to the requirement, and then the requirement is approved. And then from the requirement, then it goes to code, and then from code, it goes to peer review. And then from peer review, it goes to testing, and then the testing is approved, and then you have the final release. It's not the same doing that in documents than doing that in a tool, because in a tool, it's a click, done. And in document, you have to put revision, you have to write down the comments, you have to write everything, and then send it out by email, and then you lost traceability of who modified what because they did a replace it by email and all the stuff, right? So that's why it's better to have a tool. And of course, the peer reviews are in real time, no meeting needed, because you can use the comment section in Polarion. And then if I want to invite 3 people, I just send by email, hey guys, check this code implementation. This is the link. Leave me your comments. And that's it. So if a tool can help engineering with planning, traceability, and documentation, then we are so happy. And that's it. That's all what I have. Any questions, just let us know.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. That was great. Very informative. I want to remind everybody at this time to put your questions to us at the Q&A box. And while you're putting the questions to us, I wanted just to raise a few points, Eugenia, with regards to your presentation, some key points here. You've expressed a lot about the saving of time and how critical that is, and obviously with looking at hundreds and millions of line of code coming at us, can you just give us a little information on how Polarion has saved time in your day-to-day work process?
Well, it saves a lot of time because since everything is in real time, everybody sees the same information. If I get a call from the customer today asking for something, I can write the requirement, and then the same day, today, it can be implemented, let's say, if it's urgent. Rather than using documentation, it has to go through a meeting, which is 1 hour, and then another hour to do the requirement in Word document, and then go to approvals and everything. So that is usually with the documents, it's going to take like 4 hours. So I might not be able to implement right now what they are asking for, rather than having in Polarion. Now talking about millions of code, then saving time, these 3 hours, that means a lot of coding that can be done in 3 hours. So multiply that in a month, that's 3 hours daily. That is 30 times more that can be done. That's why saving time is really important.
Great benefit. Another thought that came from the content that you delivered is that what other companies do you feel would be able to benefit from introducing Polarion into their development processes like you have?
This is really a very good question. When I joined this company, it took about a year and a half to be in compliance with Automotive Spice and ISO 262. And with Polarion, after implementing a template that we developed here at Quantum, the latest project that we come in, it took 3 months to be in compliance. So we reduced 5 times the implementation to be in compliance. So so it can be audited in any moment and faster.
Good. So if we were talking about what kept you up at night regarding the auditors and dealing with the auditors, this has certainly improved your ability for compliance, Maria?
Yes, it did. The information is easier to find. The implementation is also really visual, so the assessment is a lot faster. So another portion is that instead of having 8 weeks of the person who is going to perform the assessment, instead of being 8 weeks daily reviews document by document, it could be reduced up to 3 weeks. So that's a lot of money can be saved for a company and a lot of time even for development and implementation of the software process.
Great, very positive. Maria, what future plans does Quantum have for expanding any of its development process with Polarian solutions?
We are expecting, right now, this started with one project right now, and right now it has been expanded up to 21 projects. And we are going to continue with any new project. We will be using Polarion and the new features that arrive or integrated with Polarion, because every time that I see a new feature, I see the possibility that the auditor will feel more comfortable with the information.
Super. Thanks very much. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks so much. There was just one or two questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation, but we have addressed those questions. So I'll just have a few closing remarks and certainly thank our presenters today, both Ahenia from Quantum Technologies and Stefan Schuck from Polarion Software. I will leave the Q&A open a little bit longer after I close out in case someone does have an additional question. Immediately following the close of today's webinar, you will receive a short evaluation, which we hope that you will complete to let us know how we did. As well, you will receive the audio recording of today's presentation, and we hope that you will share it with your colleagues. We encourage you to subscribe to the Polarion blog and to look for us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and to visit our searchable library of on-demand videos at www.polarion.com. I thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.